I'm Alex Gölle. I will be your host today at the Berkeley Innovation Study Center and Entrepreneurship and Technology Center. We have been hosting these roundtables. Today's roundtable the title is Reevaluating Supply Chain. Supply chain is a huge topic. We can't do justice to it in one session. So we will primarily focus on transportation. Now, manufacturing and retail are upcoming roundtables in this series. So retail is 11.2, manufacturing is 10.29. So if you are interested in those topics, definitely come to the website and register and participate in those events. Now, transportation, as I said, our focus is going to be logistics and distribution based on this chart. And logistics itself is a huge market. It's a huge industry. Most people don't realize that it's like 1.6 trillion, and transportation itself is $1 billion. So today we'll primarily be talking about transportation. We have some distinguished panelists who come from backgrounds that address different elements of transportation. So for that, maybe what I will do is I'll start with letting each participant do a quick introduction of themselves. Let's start with Bart.
Thank you so much, Alex, and it's a pleasure to be here on the panel today with my esteemed colleagues here. So my name is Bart de Monk. I work at the research firm Gartner. I'm a vice president of research there, and I cover the transportation technology space, so areas under technologies that are covered for transportation management, fleet management, as well as yard management. I've been an analyst now for the last 6 years. I was actually a Gartner client for the 10 years before that. I worked at PepsiCo on the shipper side, responsible for the application portfolio of our fleet warehouse and transportation systems. Before that, several years on the technology side with startups in the early 2000s, similar companies as what you see now with Convoy and other companies like Uber Freight. We were doing similar things back in early 2000s. And then before that, I was on the 3PL and asset-based logistics side in Europe, being part of the group that started Penske Logistics in Europe. So again, thanks for being here and looking forward to the discussion.
So Robert, maybe we'll go with you next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rob Leachman. I'm a professor of industrial engineering and operations research here at Berkeley. I've been on the Berkeley faculty since 1979. I teach courses and do research in the areas of high-tech manufacturing, supply chain management, and intermodal freight transportation. I also have a consulting and software firm, Leachman and Associates LLC. We provide operations management solutions and support to manufacturers, retailers, and transportation companies. In the freight transportation space, some of you might have heard of the Alameda Corridor down in Los Angeles, a new 25-mile fully grade-separated railroad that links the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles with the mainline railroad connections near downtown Los Angeles. The train loads of import containers use the corridor to move inland from San Pedro Bay with minimal environmental impact on the urban LA area. In 1983, I proposed the corridor and did the operational analysis to demonstrate its feasibility and secure environmental approval. It only took $2.1 billion in 19 years from my initial report until we cut the ribbon. But I guess that's not too bad as public works projects go nowadays. So I'm glad to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
I'm sure we'll discuss if things are going to be able to move faster now. Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself after you unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me for this discussion today. So my name is Matt Yearling. I'm the CEO of Pink. Just a bit about Pink. Pink is our core business is yard management, and that's trailer yard management. And you know, when you look at transportation today, you know, we sit at the termination points on transportation. So we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go through this, but it's in this day and age, it's important to illuminate and automate the endpoints of transportation, and that's what we do, and we're the #1 provider of that capability in the industry today. For myself, I've been in the software business for 30+ years, and for the past 20 years, focused on cloud-based applications, whether or not that's ERP, CRM, security, and supply chain. For me, this is the second company in the supply chain space. In my previous life, I was in marine terminals. So to Robert's point, fully aware of LA Long Beach and all the marine terminals down there and around the country. The area that we focus on with this with Pink today is a similar use case, but inland distribution, which is a lot larger and a lot more complex in terms of a network. And so happy to be here with today. Thank you for letting me participate.
Ashish, how about you?
Sure, Alex. Thank you. My name is Ashish Chona, and I'm with ORBCOMM. Just a little bit about ORBCOMM. ORBCOMM's a leading provider of IoT solutions in multiple industry verticals, including transportation logistics, heavy equipment, maritime. Within transportation logistics, we provide full stack IoT solutions, which include our devices, connectivity, and SaaS-based applications and analytics. Our devices are installed in the cab of trucks or on trailers, dry or refrigerated. Our connectivity is dual mode, cellular plus satellite, so providing uninterrupted IoT. And then our SaaS applications and analytics are used by customers such as Walmart and JB Hunt to provide visibility, control, and deeper insight into their fleet operations. I've been at ORBCOMM for about 5 years. I'm based in the Silicon Valley. I came in via an acquisition. I was a principal of a company where we were doing RFID-based track and trace solutions, more in supply chain and asset management. So my background is, over the last 25 years, so I spent about 10 years in semiconductor manufacturing, moved into supply chain and asset management, and then moved into broad scale IoT and transportation at ORBCOMM. I'm part of the business development team and, work with our partners, OEMs, service providers, systems integrators to provide them additional value in the products and services they provide. Very happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
So I'll next pass the word to Christian. The announcement at JET from Project 44 on this, but I think we lucked out because I wanted to have a shipper and a carrier participate in this panel, and we couldn't just fit all the different roles, but he will tell us that he actually had both of those hats before he joined Project 44. And you need to unmute yourself too.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think it's the first time anyone's ever said they were lucky to have me over Jet, but be that as it may, I'm happy to be here. My name is Christian Pillar. I'm a Vice President at Project 44. For those of you who may not be familiar with Project 44, we're the world's leading advanced visibility provider for shippers and logistics service providers. We connect, automate, and provide visibility into key transportation processes and accelerates insights and shortens the time it takes to turn those insights into action. What does that all mean? I'm frequently asked to come up with a clever analogy, and I think the global supply chain is like a VHS tape, and Project 44 is Netflix, if you will. As Alex said, prior to Project 44, I spent 4 years at Amazon in various leadership roles in domestic transportation, supply chain optimization, and then externalizing Amazon Freight. And then prior to that, I was in transportation leadership for W.W. Grainger, both of which are now customers of Project 44, so that's exciting. But happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
So maybe I should also say a couple words about myself. After my PhD at UC Berkeley, my career evolved as an entrepreneur. My second company was Pink, which I handed off to Matt, what was this, 5-6 years ago, has been doing an excellent job. My day job is my third startup. We are sort of a digital age 800 number providers in the form of URLs. So we allow customers to step into any business with one click, no appointments, no downloads. having done, I mean, my startups typically take 5-10 years. So after one site, I don't want to do a fourth startup. So I've been charting my way back to academia. And that's what brought me to Sutarja Center, where I started working with ICLAC and doing some teaching. And what better person to talk about Sutarja Center than the founder and director, ICLAC. So ICLAC, tell us a little bit more about the center, the charter, and why we are hosting these meetings.
All right, great. So first of all, just thank you and welcome to everybody in the audience. Thank you to the panelists. And we're basically kicking off this particular roundtable on basically on supply chain with a focus on innovation. This roundtable is part of our series, which is on the topic of innovation that matters. And so there's focusing on really kind of out of the spectrum of all the innovation that gets done, there's a lot of change going on in the world, and it's making innovation kind of more real and more essential right now because of all of this change. So this change is partly all the health changes going on in the world. It's the change in the economy. Different parts of the economy are shrinking. Some parts of the economy are actually expanding. What we consume is changing. How we consume it is changing. And supply chain is not really different from this. Supply chain is changing because all of these other things are changing. And supply chain, to some degree, is is more essential than most of those other things because it's a backbone to into just really everyone's work and everyone's life. So it's incredibly important. Now, why do we host this roundtable? One reason is to understand the changes that are going on, and by itself, that's a really good reason. But we also host it as a mini advisory board. So this is a chance to get the experts in this particular area together. And we'd like to, listen as, so, I'm the founding director and I'm the chief scientist of the Sutarja Center. And I would like to take this input in as if it was, another advisory board as a board to help us understand how should we be engaging with these changes that are going on? How should Berkeley at some level engage with this? What would be right for our students? How do we engage with different partners and other academic institutions? So it's an education to the audience, but it's also an education to us. In order for you to give us advice which makes sense, I'd like to share one slide with you that explains what we do at the center. So I'm gonna pull that up right now. This is, I won't put it into full presentation mode. I'll just put it, one reason is because whenever I do, I literally have no idea what's gonna happen in whether the screen completely goes or whatever. So I'm gonna leave it in this format. And the mission of the center is to empower innovators to change the world, and in fact, positively change the world. We originally wrote it as to change the world, and we realized that you can also change it negatively. So it's to positively change the world. We have three categories of things that happen in the center. One is there's a teaching category called Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship. And this is largely an undergraduate set of courses. And one thing that it focuses on beyond the frameworks and beyond the practice projects of starting ventures, it focuses on the mindset and the behavior and almost the psychology component that is developing the person to be entrepreneurial, not only understanding I will call it the surface knowledge of how to start the venture. A second category, so that's this first one. Second category of things that we do is in the area of innovation engineering. And how we make those things real is through X Labs. And so X basically stands for innovation. We have a number of innovation labs. We have things in data, blockchain, plant-based meat, sports technology. We did a XLab, Alex and I did an XLab course last semester with GSM. This is an example where all the phone companies, or basically GSMA partners with virtually every phone company in the world. So AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint, because those two companies are together. They're all participating, and we had students take on the how does the telephone operator change and how do their customers change because of the section of 5G and AI. And in particular, in those classes, we build these projects. So half of it is what's the story, the other half is building the technology. And that is a neutral ground convening system. It's a way for open innovation to happen, things like that. The third category of things that we do, oh, and by the way, I should say also, we do a lot of industry engagement in DataX. It's a very practical, almost maker's guide, hacker's guide to data science. And many companies engage in data science applied to the other topics. Okay, in the third category is professional and global education, and simply what we learn in terms of the mindset, behavior, and process of entrepreneurship, and what we learn in the technical innovation areas. We put those two together, and it translates into programs like our engineering leadership program and others. In this particular program, we've been running this program for about 9 years now, I think 9 years, and that includes the typical attendees are Apple, Google, Yahoo, Network Appliances, Samsung, Cisco, the semiconductor companies, and the makers of like equipment makers for the semiconductor companies and so forth. Anyway, so there's all these three categories. Again, the goal is to empower people, our students in particular, to change the world positively. And with that, you have enough background that we don't want to change anything that you're going to say. We really want to understand supply chain and what's happening, but you have the ability to translate it a little bit for us to be able to make it actionable. So with that, I'm going to stop the share, hand it back to you, and really thank you for making the panel happen.
Thanks, Clark. So a couple things about the logistics. So for the audience, thanks for being here. If there are advantages and disadvantages to doing this thing online. If this was in person, I would see the audience, see what the reactions are. So unfortunately, we don't get to do that. But the upside is you can all participate and participate a lot more. So do use the Q&A. So if you have any questions that you want to submit them. You see Jennifer and Raphael, they are also helping us with this event. They are going to compile those questions. So I will be able to pose them to the panel members. Now, the last question we're going to address is, so what should the audience walk away with, one thing that they should learn from here? And what's your prediction? What are the key changes in the next 6 months? One key change in the next 6 months in transportation and supply chain. I will invite you all to submit your thought. So you can actually type, everybody can type into the chat. You don't need for the mic to be brought to you. And we'll collate all of that. I will repeat this at the end and we'll publish that. Now, we're also gonna run a number of polls. So maybe, and Keith is in charge of those. Maybe Keith, let's hear a little bit from the audience. Let's understand what industry they are from. Let's run that poll while I'll tell you guys how we're gonna move from here. Bart is sort of the expert we all know. So I've asked, he is kindly gonna be sharing with us over the first 10 minutes or so, where the industry is and what changes have transpired. After that, we'll come back. Everybody will participate in quick questions and answers. We have a few questions we have sort of set. You have read them in the event announcement. but it's going to be more free flowing. People will be able to ask questions and interject. With that, we'll take a couple more minutes to see, I guess, the retail guys are going to come to our retail roundtable. We don't have that many from retail. I was hoping there would be more students from UC coming, but
we should probably share the results.
yeah.
Still a few more coming in, so give it another 15 seconds, I think.
Okay.
Yep, there's still a few coming in.
Okay, I'm going to end and share.
Okay.
And
So
the winner is
technology provider. So
Good.
let's do this. Let's pass the word to Bart, and Bart will take it from here and share his screen and tell us what he has been seeing.
Very good, and thank you for that, Alex. Hopefully you guys can see the screen and hear me okay. So a lot of changes going on, right? I think that's not a surprise for anyone. And so what I wanted to kind of talk about is what we've seen within the supply chain, and then very specific to what we see happening in transportation across all industries. So it should come at no surprise that when we talk to companies, we ask them, what do you see as your top risks, right, in the supply chain 2020? It's obviously the current pandemic, right, which is really the biggest turn, the biggest challenge that we've had, at least in my generation, probably most of our generations. It has hit us like anything we've seen before in supply chain, and it's affecting all countries worldwide, all industries, and all companies. But what we also still see that besides the pandemic, logistics and transportation is still an area where we see a lot of disruption and a lot of risk going on. So there's a lot of focus in that area in how companies can improve their transportation. And so if we look at the market specific to North America, and I think maybe some people might be joining from other areas as well, but I think probably the highest percentages are US, we're seeing a lot of changes in the industry, whether it's consumers behaving differently, right? And we've seen that in the huge increases in last mile delivery. And people always think, well, it's just last mile, but it also affects first and middle mile. We've seen, starting to see increasing demand for transportation as the industries and as the economy is starting to go back. And we're going to continue seeing that evolve for the rest of the year as well as for next year. We're seeing rates starting to increase again, where we were kind of maybe more at a low point a few months ago when there wasn't as much demand, or where we saw peak demands in certain industries. We've already seen a lot of companies, a lot of Gartner customers that were dealing with high volumes with UPS and FedEx that are being notified by them and saying, hey, you know what, your rates are going to go up as much as 20% if you want to continue working with us. So that part is a big challenge as well. At the same time, we've seen carriers struggling to survive because a lot of it has to do with cost management and management of the cash flow. So we're going to continue seeing higher carrier bankruptcies. Last year, we had over 900 bankruptcies in the transportation industry. Obviously, that affects capacity. We're also seeing that industry a continued increase in the cost, mainly for insurance. Insurance is by far, if you look at the last 10 years, the one cost within transportation that has increased over 40%, almost double from what we've seen the average increase in cost in transportation. At the same time, when there are incidents, we've seen a record number and record verdicts that are being raised against these trucking companies. And so we're seeing that really, whether you're small or you're a very large trucking company, you can be affected by that as well. And we're starting to see people kind of looking at other models as well to get to their freight. So where people maybe historically have been looking at just pure contracted carriers or dedicated carriers, they're starting to look more at digital models to get to that access to that freight as well. And then what we'll talk about today is technology and how we're seeing people really increasing the use of technology. We know the expression of necessity is the mother of invention. What we really see today is necessity has become the mother of digital disruption. And so people have a big focus on how they're actually using technology. So what is the difference really because of the pandemic and how we're seeing companies evolving? And again, keep in mind, we're kind of generalizing here, but overall, we still in transportation, I would say it's a very conservative industry. We still see a lot of manual processes and manual documents being created in that industry. There wasn't necessarily a huge focus on people mobility and how people could interact with systems in a more mobile and more automated way. Historically, it's been an area where there was slower adoption of technology. If you compare that with some of the things that we're doing in warehouse automation, or we're looking at manufacturing plants that are completely automated, transportation still very much based on manual processes and manual interactions. Historically, people would do large CapEx projects and would invest in logistics and large warehouse projects, TMSs, etc., and less focus on digital business models. We've also seen that companies, when they did invest in technology, focused mainly on how do we really optimize our internal operations. But there wasn't enough collaboration. We start to see that as well, where companies saying, because we have to, how do we use technology and how does it allow us, these cloud-based networks, to also collaborate maybe with our customers, with our suppliers, or even with other shippers. And so historically, although there were technologies around for a long time, like electronic bills of lading, people really didn't have the motivation to change. So overall, we've seen that there was a lot of manual interactions and very much inefficiencies in that process. So what has happened because of the pandemic? We're really seeing that companies across the supply chain, including transportation, really have had a big focus on automation and digitization. We have to, because people are working remote. Things are coming at a faster speed. You can't just go in manual way. So we're seeing more dependence on technology. We've actually seen a huge increase in people adopting certain technologies, and we'll get to those in a couple of questions. And even the invest community, private equity companies, venture capitalists have had a big investment round in the last few months in the midst of the pandemic in these technologies. We're also seeing that people are changing in what they're investing in. So where before maybe it was more focused around CapEx investments, the CFOs who kind of today control the supply chain are focused on cost management. They're focused on controlling the cash flow. So they're still investing in technology, but it has to be more OpEx subscription based and has to be in something that's short time to value. Well, the good news is transportation technology has a lot of these cloud-based solutions, being one of the highest adopters of cloud-based technology. So it's perfectly positioned to offer solutions that can be implemented quickly and provide value very quickly as well. Also, companies are looking at speed, right? Alex, you referred to it earlier. McKinsey came out with a note a few months ago, and the title of the note I thought was very clever, but actually very true. And it was, "Welcome to the year 2025, 16 months early." And really talks about how companies thought they had 2, 3, 5 years to figure out their digital business models. And really now they found out during the pandemic, they only had weeks and months to figure all of this out. So all of that means we've gone into this huge acceleration. And then we've seen things like advanced analytics. And when you talk about academia, which obviously plays a big role, not just in providing education to our future leaders in supply chain, and talent is a big issue in supply chain where we need more supply chain talent coming into the industry. But the other part is we've never seen so much evolution coming from academia around things like advanced analytics, areas of artificial intelligence and machine learning that comes from the academia and that now we can start using and that large companies are using in their day-to-day operations. So again, because of this pandemic, it really has kickstarted in a lot of cases the progress that companies have been maybe putting off for too many years. For other companies that had sped up their adoption of technologies, and for other companies that already had a high adoption rate of new technologies, they're continuing, they're even increasing the adoption of emerging and growth technologies. All right, Alex, I think it's back over to you.
Sounds good, thank you. Is that the audience clapping?
Nice.
Thanks, Bart. So a couple things you said that resonated with me, which I'm sure we'll get back to, is like the fact that VCs are investing in supply chain because, oops, the audience is still excited. Let's mute them. 16 years ago, when we're trying to get Pink funded, it was a challenge to get the VCs excited about a supply chain company. The other thing is even the talent. I'm sure talent is going to come up in these discussions. Students are a lot more interested in going into a Bay Area high-tech company working on social media rather than working on rubber meets the road type of supply chain problems. And the other thing that at some point ECLOC is going to, I'm sure, talk about is increased speeds, because one of the mottos of the center has been innovation that matters with much shorter timelines. But with that, I want to open it to Matt, Ashish, and Christian, because you guys have been at the front line of this. What have you seen and what do you have to add?
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, good. So, well, everything that Bart says is, 100% correct, right? So, I mean, in terms of what the impact of the pandemic is that it's certainly accelerated the digitization strategies of all of the corporations. And, my three reactions to it really, in terms of, the pandemic in general, is that it's definitely accelerated the shift to online commerce. And that's really, impacted a lot of companies in terms of how they got to shift operations, whether or not it's grocery operations or apparel manufacturers that typically have brick and mortar stores, and now they're growing their online, and now they're making a lot of money actually manufacturing masks as opposed to traditional garments, right? So, it's definitely impacted everything along the lines of what is online commerce and what does it mean from a supply demand perspective, because, and we'll come back to this later, I'm sure. I mean, the big issue is how do you align the inventory to demand in general? And that's a big problem. The other thing, and it goes to what you both mentioned, was there's a lot of consolidation, a lot of investment, a lot of consolidation in play in the industry, primarily because we're still very highly fragmented. There's still a lot of opportunity for technology enablement. And I don't think there's nobody that can say or is arrogant enough to say that me as a company could solve all supply chain problems. And so it's inherent upon us to make sure that we come together as from a collaborative standpoint in the industry. And I know that's one of the projects that ourselves and even Project 44 are working on right now. It's like industry giants coming together, being collaborative, being transparent for the benefit of a joint customer. And that's, I think, a dynamic that's going to occur a lot more, as well as consolidation. And then the final piece is that this is an essential industry. I think that's really highlighted the fact that this pandemic has really highlighted that we're in a place now where we're an essential part of keeping this country afloat. And that does mean that we need to have the talent to come in to address and to add value to what we need to do around this. And we've got a lot of talented workers, essential workers in this industry. And the focus on the supply chain in general is just going to get bigger and bigger as time goes on. No doubt about that.
Ashish, Christian.
Yeah, so I mean, Bart and Matt both mentioned it, but COVID-19 has certainly been a catalyst or a tailwind for supply chain visibility and digitization. In fact, Project 44 saw a really strong first half of 2020 in global expansion. As I talk to more people and I'm asked more questions during the pandemic, a lot of it comes down to supply chain. I think it's the first time that supply chains really had a place at the table or been part of mainstream conversation, where more people are working from home and wondering why their couch is late, or their, now the Wall Street Journal Wine Club, which I love, it takes a little bit longer to get to my doorstep, and how and why that is. And I think all that rolls into supply chain resiliency, and it's something that coming out of the pandemic, I hope a lot of companies start to think about is how can I create a data-driven supply chain planning and management process? What about network redundancy and optionality, both modal and supply? We have to be prepared for something like this in the future, and hopefully it won't be as painful on the supply chain. And I think the last thing is having an integrated view of inbound and outbound networks across all modes, just planning all the shipments you have in one unified central planner versus having a few different ways to plan transportation. And that'll unlock a lot of operations efficiency, cost efficiency, and performance improvements.
So yeah, I'll just jump in here and to what Christian and Matt and Bart said. Completely agree on all those points, right? We've kind of seen our supply chain over the last 20 years have been global, become very complex. They've been optimized based on cost, whether it's inventory, whether it's supplier rationalization, whether it's location of a manufacturing plant. The pandemic has clearly highlighted kind of the weakness in the supply chain. It's kind of made people aware that they're dependent on other parts of the world for products that they use today. And so this is obviously like Bart mentioned, supply chain managers, executives are looking at retooling their supply chain, and either it's to supplier redundancy or obviously we're all caught up by reducing inventory, and maybe it's okay during this pandemic to have a little extra excess inventory. The financial institutions obviously measure all these companies, and inventory is a key part, but maybe there should be some accounting practice which kind of addresses that, especially during a pandemic when you're trying to help and serve the community. And so I'm sure some of these things people are thinking through them, they're talking through them. Again, like what Bart said, we are seeing a lot of adoption of digitization, automation. We're in the IoT space, our IoT technologies, but cloud, mobility, robotics, and warehouse operations. I know we're not going to talk about that. We're seeing that as well. And within transportation, like Christian said, right, now you have an ecosystem, or Matt had said, you have an ecosystem of partners. We serve a lot of the carrier customers. Project 44 serves the shippers. Now you need to be able to share this information. Delivery windows are becoming very, very tight. So, it's like, just like on the last mile, right? You expect when you have let's say an Amazon delivery and it doesn't show up within 30 minutes or an hour, you're kind of saying, you have that kind of expectation, information, or that, you want it right away. And so information sharing, at least in transportation, is going to be very critical.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you bring up, Ashish, is that people will reevaluate trade-offs between efficiency and resiliency and agility, right? If you're so efficient that one thing just collapses everything, then that's actually also pointless.
Right. And Professor Leachman will obviously be able to talk to us about it, but we know resiliency and efficiency kind of push each other. And so you want to be agile in between, especially certainly if your demand goes up, you want to be able to maybe have some of those excess inventory buffers. And if you have a connected supply chain information visibility, you don't have the bullwhip effect. All the key participants have that information, and you could have that agility, and then that which drives resiliency.
So that's a good segue to Robert, to you, is you also bring two different perspectives. You are a lot more in multimodal, and you look at this from academia.
So Alex asked me to represent a university perspective, but I don't think I can possibly represent the whole university. It's impossible for me to know everything that might be going on related to supply chain and transportation in a huge place like the university. But let me say a few things from my own perspective and experience. Is first I want to talk about intermodal movement. Is most of the durable goods that we consume in this country are not made here. They're made overseas. And I think a big challenge for supply chains and why it's been slow to adopt technology and so forth is that there's so many players in the game. Even if you contract with an ocean carrier to move a box from somewhere in the middle of China into the somewhere in the middle of the US. They're in turn subcontracting with dray companies in China and in the US and railroads, and the box is moving over all of these. And then to get the information to who it really matters, the beneficial cargo owner of the freight isn't happening. Even if it's collected along the way, there's just so many players in there that are not necessarily sharing the information. And there's a lot of failure modes of why a box might miss a connection from a dray to a vessel or a vessel to a train. Homeland security may get involved. There's all kinds of things that could go wrong. And for the beneficial cargo owner to know what's going on and where stuff is, then they have at least the starting point, the information to try to react and replan their supply chain. I also want to mention that it's not just a matter of tracking the vehicles, the trailers or the containers, but most large retailers nowadays, whether they're brick and mortar or e-commerce, are heavy users of cross-docking and transloading, whereby the trailer or container loads that contain many different products from many different supplier origins are brought to a cross-dock or a transloading facility. And at the cross-dock, the inbound vehicles are unloaded, the individual cartons of various products are sorted, and outbound loads containing the whole product portfolio are built for distribution center destinations spread out in various regions. And doing this enables more efficient use of the vehicles to be fully loaded. And just as importantly, you have a chance, you have feedback to do reallocation of the in-transit goods to better balance the regional inventories. So in times when demand is fluctuating because of things like the pandemic being higher or lower, in some places this is a big deal. It's very easy to end up sending stuff to the wrong place when supply chains take months to get there. And so in a well-run place, you have up-to-date information on the sales forecasts in each region, the inventories at each distribution center, and what's in transit to each center, and up-to-date information on exactly how many cartons of each product are coming to the dock. And then you do an intelligent allocation to build the outbound loads, accounting for the cube and weight capacity of the vehicles. And then back to the human element that Bart mentioned is that all the handling of freight to unload vehicles and reload them is done by hand. So there's, with all the various size cartons, there's considerable uncertainty exactly how many are going to get in the vehicle, and then ultimately where the heck a particular carton is. So now we have the need for carton level tracking, not just vehicle level tracking, to have the information to know what's going on. And we have the need for a good, sophisticated, but yet practical optimization software to take all this information and then very quickly, based on the latest information of what's coming to the dock and what we need where, to redirect stuff to the right place. I might mention that one of the big retailers that just went bankrupt is that when I went and audited how they do stuff, they were making their cross-dock plans almost a month in advance. And that's just not the way you can run a supply chain during a pandemic or anything. So I totally agree with the previous speakers that the shocks that we've had now make people realize the weaknesses in their system, and they're motivated to try to be a lot more sophisticated about it. But it's a big challenge since there's so many players in the game, not just multiple transportation modes and carriers, but even things like cross-docks are typically run by third-party logistics firms. So you're integrating many different companies to give the beneficial cargo owner the visibility and the ability to manage that supply chain and redirect the freight as it moves.
Good. So, I mean, one of the things you mentioned was whether these trailers and containers are loaded or not. So I can't help but share this slide. So my wife was stuck behind a trailer tractor in Germany on the Autobahn. For those of you who don't read German, it says, "Without me, the highway would be empty, just like your refrigerator." And I know that you mean 25%, because I can't help but ask when I see something like this but is that trailer full? Because 25% of the time we are stuck behind an empty trailer. So I want to bring in a couple questions related to this from the audience that came in. And one is that, there are a lot of technology companies that are working on these type of visibility solutions. It's a lot more institutional barriers that's preventing this from happening. Another one is the US DOT today launched its National Freight Strategic Plan. One of the 3 pillars covers data technology and workforce development, but as a support for the other pillars, safety, security, resilience, and modernization of infrastructure, does the panel believe this is a correct positioning from the supply chain perspective or a more traditional transportation view? So this issue of trailers being empty has been there. Technology is probably there to address it, but what are the institutional barriers that are preventing us from doing this? And any one of you can answer.
So one of the things I think about is just the efficiency at origin and destination. So trailers have to wait a really long time to get into a yard. Sometimes they have to wait even longer to be loaded or unloaded. I think a lot of efficiencies can be gained from tighter coordination. And with that, we'll see improved trailer utilization, improved asset utilization, and that driver shortage or trucks driving empty. I think those problems will go away if we're only able to find a short amount of time. Maybe a few months back, I read research by a university talking about the actual number of hours a truck driver drives on a daily basis. It's actually not as high as you'd think. It's nowhere close to the limit. And the majority of the reason why is because there's so much time waiting. And I think once we're able to start chipping away at those wait times, which we can do with increased data fidelity, increased efficiency and collaboration, we'll be able to reduce those wait times and largely solve driver shortage issues, trailer supply issues, trailer utilization issues, and maybe even traffic issues if we think about it hard enough.
So, okay, if I could jump in, Alex, what we're doing is obviously we are in the IoT space and we provide cargo door sensors and video analytics, which tell you what's inside the trailer and what its condition is. So we have that information and for the trailers that we serve, and obviously we provide that information in terms of analytics to our customers who are interested, like what Christian said, is dwell time in the geofence analytics or trip or lane-based analytics. But you want to see, okay, is your trailer empty? They want to maximize utilization of their trailers. So with that technology, you can do that. But integration of that information, let's say with something like a digital freight network, will help at least the carrier maximize the utilization of those trailers and not let them go empty on the freeway like you saw in Germany, right? So it's the technology is there, and you're right. What are the institutional barriers? It's all about making these connections, sharing this information, so that the right stakeholders have that, and you can drive business value. In the case of the carrier, want to maximize the utilization of their trailers. They don't want to be traveling empty on the road.
If you
I would add to that.
Go ahead, Bart. Go ahead.
I was going to add to that. So on the one hand, obviously shippers have a say in that, and we see that shippers have kind of focused on optimizing their own supply chains. We do, now that we get systems that are kind of cloud-based, are working in the network, it provides opportunities for people to work better together. I can remember when I was at PepsiCo and we had the willingness to work together, it would take months of work to work with another company like a Georgia Pacific to figure out our joint networks and where the opportunities are. So we are starting to see these data points that are at our fingertips, but we have to first be willing and be open enough to work together. The other part is also part of the consumer responsibility. If we're all continuing to say, I want everything now and I want it tomorrow, I want it this afternoon, and we're forcing companies like Amazon to kind of ship something straight away, that obviously causes a lot of inefficiency as well. Luckily, right, and I think most of us on the panel maybe are a little bit of an older generation, but the young generation is much more sustainability minded when it comes to ordering things, and is willing in some cases to wait 5 to 8 days to slow the process down, to also look at sustainable packaging, which will help drive also the efficiency on the transportation side, which will help to use the capacity better. Because it's not, you can throw as much capacity to it if you want. If we're going to continue to abuse the capacity, then it's never going to resolve itself.
That's an excellent point, Bart. I completely agree, right? Because with this Amazon effect, we're expecting deliveries right away. But if the younger generation needs sustainable, you tell them, hey, look, it'll be a more sustainable transaction if you wait for 5 days, and they will sign up. We know that. That's a great point. That education is important. Yeah.
Yeah, we saw an example. Timberland is a good example. They offered that they would plant a tree. Maybe sounds to some silly, but to plant a tree if you would do longer delivery times. They were able to almost affect 20% of their volume, and for that volume went closer to 8 days of delivery rather than the expected next day to 2 day. And understand, and I see a comment out there, is that, yeah, Amazon started introducing it. Unfortunately, once you give people that kind of mindset of this is possible, everybody wants it. So it's also on us to say, you know, Amazon, we don't want that. I don't need that shirt that I'm ordering for a trip in 2 weeks. I don't need that today. But if you're offering it to me for free shipping, I will do it. So I think there is a change. And a lot of times when some of my colleagues in the retail side talk about the kind of unified e-commerce experience, we talk about it's not, you don't go as fast as you can to win the game. Sometimes you have to say, we need to slow it down to be better at customer experience.
Matt, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just to follow on from Ashish and Bart, as well as just to dovetail into what Christian was talking about. You know, look, driver detention is a topic near and dear to my heart. That's a key problem that we're focused on, and we're driving a lot of value associated with doing that. There's a lot of industry figures, and if you remember a couple years ago, the drop and hook, you know, there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained. I could tell you the story about Walmart and things like that, but you know, we don't have the time. But the key thing here is that there is a lot of data getting generated. And the issue that I see is it gets messed up when people get involved. So when we look at customers utilizing our system, and the vast majority of work instructions are automated based on some rules, then let the system do the work, get out of the way. And I think, you know, that is the opportunity for us. If, you know, going back to what Bart was saying around, you know, AI technologies, machine learning, there's a lot of opportunity to apply this type of technology such that humans can get out of the way and add more high value add tasks, as opposed to doing, you know, the exception management, which is the norm in the supply chain today. That is the norm for everybody, Amazon included. You go to an Amazon meeting, they're on their laptop handling exceptions. Christian is smiling because he knows that's true, right? It's very much an exception-based supply chain today. Yep.
So, I mean,
that is true.
Here is that from a carrier point of view, maybe the truck is either loaded or empty. But from the beneficial cargo owner, it's also, how full is that truck? And are we really filling that vehicle to its true capacity, or is it not, or could it have had a lot more in there? When I talk about automation, I usually split it into two cases. One is kind of physical or material handling automation, and the other I call information handling automation, which enables the AI and what a lot of the speakers, panelists have been talking about. And if we were really going to utilize our vehicles better, then we're going to have the information handling automation that back at, you know, where the box is being loaded, we knew the weight and cube of every carton. All right, so then we know how to, you know, when we transload it and repack other vehicles, we know how much we can fill them up. Right now that information is missing, and you have to, you know, be conservative. And so we don't have full vehicles out there. The carrier's getting paid, whether it's half full or full, they're happy, but this is not efficient.
So everybody mentioned AI and all these technologies. One of our polls was going to be of the following, which are the most important subjects for innovation and future of the supply chain. Keith, maybe we can go ahead and run that poll and we can also get the audience's take on it, because I want to talk a little bit more about, okay, so what are the innovation investment drivers and what can people expect as return on their investment?
Hey, Alex, can I want to just interject a question. So I've definitely got this message that that digital system acceleration and so forth is necessary for supply chain, and there's all this efficiency to be gained. This can be manifested in two categories. One is that it's just a matter of hooking up all of the systems together, writing the code that glues these things, basically somehow making it like seamless or, you know, whatever. The other is that there's things that need to be predicted. You know, it's not a matter of writing the rules to run them automatically, but there's things to predict or be able to classify, or to, like, what could you statistically want to take a guess at that would somehow improve things? And so I'd like to know, you know, from the group, do they think most of the improvement will come from digitizing it, you know, like rule-based, or if it is things that can be predicted or classified or things like that in some way, then can we get some examples? I think we can always predict, you know, does a person want to buy this thing or that thing? But within the supply chain, what kind of a thing could be predicted that would be really helpful?
Yeah, I can talk to that. So, and I have a slide to kind of illustrate that as well. So what we've seen kind of over the last few months, right? What are the technologies that are really making a difference? And we look at that within the 4 phases that Gartner's identified within the pandemic, which was at first people just are reacting, then they're kind of saying, oh, we're getting used to this new normal, this new reality. Then they're looking at how do we rebound to kind of where we were at the start and then accelerate opportunities. So a big part of what they're actually doing is using technologies, and it is actually a combination of what you're saying. So you're actually seeing advanced analytics is a big part of that. People need to be able to predict. People need to be able to start model. So when there is a second wave, a third wave, whatever that new turn is, whatever unexpected evolution there is, people don't get taken by surprise. There's examples out there. HEB is a good example of a company that even after the last recession, they were one of the few companies that put in place, I think the role was something like VP of pandemics and industry disruption. And we actually saw that they put processes in place and technologies in place. And when the current pandemic hit, they were affected a lot less than other retailers. So part of it is, how do you put the right pieces in place? And I'm sure a lot of you will talk about your individual areas, but visibility, it's not something we've traditionally had in TMS. So that's where we see these new platforms providing that. Yard management, I've always claimed that at 10 years that I was with PepsiCo, we put it, and I know we worked with Pink at Quaker and some of our other organizations, and I put yard management on the strategic plan every year, and it never made the cut. It just didn't have enough focus. And so we're starting to see that there's existing solutions people just haven't used in the past that they accelerate.
Yeah.
Then they see these newer models like visibility or digitized freight platforms that they're starting to use on top of modeling and things like advanced analytics, as you mentioned, to start planning and predicting for the future.
That's a really helpful answer. You know, and I got the message that the answer is both, you know, the systems as well as the prediction. Help me understand, you know, like maybe a prediction is when will the package get there? Or maybe a prediction is this truck going to be full? Or maybe a prediction is how much does it cost us to get it, even though that package has never been shipped? Or next month, how much is it going to cost to get it shipped? I'm looking for the types of things that, are they already built into systems, or are those the types of things that we imagine will be built into systems, and do they have value, those types of predictions?
I'd like to interject one point for you, Iklak, and that is that you must remember there's multiple players in the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
And they all have portions of the data. And there are just endless cases where the data one participant has, they could do work on it, but it doesn't really benefit their portion of the supply chain, not according to the way they're paid in the contracts they have. It benefits somebody else in the supply chain. All right, and so you're really looking at having to change contract terms and incentives and so forth. Most of the benefit really is at that shipper at the end there, and you know, to asking carriers to invest in stuff where, you know, they get paid for transportation. They don't get paid for information under current contract terms. And I think that's a big drag on, you know, innovation and accelerating improvement in this industry compared to others.
Okay.
I think this probably would be good for some of the providers on the panel, right, to give their insight, because I think a lot of them are focused not just on the application side, but really much more on how do we bring data insights together, like telematics, which used to be all around hardware and communication, now become data insights platforms. The visibility place is really data insight. So maybe some of the guys on the panel can provide how they address that with their technologies.
Sure, I can. You want? I can just take initial stab at that. Again, to Iklak's question, right? Whether it's a rules or descriptive analytics based solution, or a predictive or prescriptive analytics based solution, it really depends on the problem you're looking to solve and what kind of inputs you have, how precise that input is, and how you solve it. So, you know, at ORBCOMM, you know, we do both. We do descriptive and predictive analytics, and so some of the use cases. And Bart, you're right. Being the telematics platform, we get all that data in real time. We're using camera and video technology to kind of look at the cargo. We're also involved on the warehouse side as well. We're looking at a sequence of sensory events to predict the quality of a load. So it's especially in refrigerated transportation. You know, you mentioned, right? I mean, you know, the carrier has to haul those goods from a shipper to the consignee, but you know, they're on the hook for the quality of the goods that they're carrying. So the reefer unit, the temperature profile, what is the set point, what's a return, there are a lot of parameters that go in. And so you can, if you have the right kind of techniques, we're using AI and ML, you can start predicting whether it's a hot load or not. And so the main thing, and that's supply chain risk, right? You want to know it's a hot load before it leaves before it leaves the geofence of the shipper or of the shipper, and not after it enters into the geofence of the consignee. So that's where a lot of these predictive analytics, AI, machine learning come to bear. And so those are some of the things that we're involved in. Now, others could be more statistical, like dwell times or trip analytics. But again, it depends on the kind of the problem you're looking to solve, what information you have, and then use the right algorithm to solve it.
And I know that Matt and Christian want to answer this question too, but I'm going to launch another poll in terms of what are the main drivers for innovation investment in the current climate. I'm sure COVID-19 is going to come get points, but Matt, Christian, you can continue answering while people are voting.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, so
go ahead, Christian.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, go ahead, Christian. You go first.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, so as Ashish was saying, that the connectivity to the trucks or the machines that are the originator of the data themselves is important. One of the things Project 44 does is has a platform where different shippers or different personas within the shipper can see where their trucks are. And that information is also able to be put back into TMSs and systems of record. So a lot of the high fidelity data can be put right back into the systems that are making these complicated mathematical decisions, especially with TMSs when they think about route planning, modal efficiency, which carrier within a mode. The way I always think about it is the TMS is an engine, and you know, higher fidelity data is the higher octane fuel that makes that engine run more efficiently. So I think it's a matter of connecting high fidelity data sources to the systems that are actually making the decisions, And once we establish that baseline, then we're able to talk about new and exciting things like AI, like ML, and really define the customer experience for the global supply chain.
So, yeah, I mean, going back to what Robert was saying, it's very complex, right? So there's opportunities all over the place. But just to dovetail into Ashish and Christian, you know, we are at the termination points of transportation, right? So what we do around yard management is kind of like a TMS without a plan, okay? So we do understand that a lot of activities are scheduled, but exceptions are the norm. So connecting with the likes of Project 44 or others, you know, around ETA and being predictive around what's coming in, and on the fly changing operations and prioritizing what needs to be done. Depending on your industry vertical, that's huge, right? If you're manufacturing, it's inbound supplies to the manufacturing plant. If it's a retailer, it's orchestrating a wave of outbound velocity, you know, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So there are definite rules that you can put in place and just say, look, this is what we think is going to happen, but we know that exceptions are going to come up. How do I get those real-time pieces of data, and then how does that affect my plan, and let the system make those determinations based on rules? And so, as I say, we are most of the companies in North America, 80% of the time, they're dropping loads. And as I say, we are operating like a mini TMS in the context inside the 4 fences of the facility. And you know, that's what I say. The opportunity to doing more AI is what we're doing. And increasing the level of automation and getting more predictive around the impact on transportation expense is huge, right? So there's some big opportunities that are coming up in the coming months to actually prove that out with certain customers, and I think you'll see some more of this application of technology going forward.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to start wrapping up. So I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about innovation, why our company is innovating, and what returns to expect from them. Definitely incorporate that to your answers, but I think everybody should sort of take their turn now and have like one more thought, everybody to impart on everybody to walk away with. And let's also do a prediction of what's one key change in the next 6 months that we'll all see in the supply chain and transportation. And here I also want to open it to the audience. Definitely all of you type in what is one prediction that you guys have.
Hey,
So
Alex,
go ahead, Clark.
Only if this makes sense for your version of moderation here, for how you want to do it. I have a couple of questions that I could put out. Nobody has to answer them, but if they happen to think a good response to that, that could be wrapped up into their, you know, kind of final comment. So, you know, it like I pulled a lot of feedback out of the whole discussion. A couple example things that could be asked at this point. One is, with all the supply chain acceleration, do you think that the acceleration goes back to normal next year or after? Is this a temporary thing, or is it, you know, or does it really stick? So you don't have to answer it, but if you got an opinion on it, you could. Another question is fixing these challenges, do you consider it more of a technology problem, as in what are the things that can be put together, or do you think of it more as a leadership problem? Who are the people that can bridge these different organizations and subsets and so forth together, maybe to make those agreements, things like that? And finally, just in terms of the education aspects, what are, actually it's not finally, one more is, I guess it's related to the education aspects, but do you think that some sort of supply chain X lab, innovation lab, does that make sense as a convening area? Is there something on the education or technology development side or leadership side where that would have a role? You can answer any version of those. Love to hear the feedback.
Let's all take a couple minutes. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm happy not.
Go ahead, Bart.
All right, I'll try and frame it a little bit, and I promise to everyone this is the last slide I'm going to share. And I'll try to answer Clark's questions in there as well. So one advice would be, right, depending on where you are, what phase you think your company is in, or who you're working with, maybe as a technology vendor within those different phases. The fact is, in order to get to your ambition, which is really kind of finding the opportunities in the turns and in this disruption and coming out stronger, just as what we saw in the recession 2008, 2009, we saw the strong supply chains coming out way stronger than the competition. And unfortunately, some companies didn't make it out alive. So my one thing to take away is look at what you need to do from a strategic point of view, from an organization, from a people and talent perspective, and how technology enables you to get out there and do the right things, not to just survive today. So as the economy is going to come back, you need to put things in place to also grab the opportunities, because your competitors are doing the same thing. You don't want to be left behind. And so if you look at it, the first question you had was around what's going to happen when we're done with this disruption. We're actually within Gartner expecting turns to come at us in much higher quantities and in much more frequency and much faster. So I think the idea of once this is behind us and we can go back to our old ways is not going to happen. Things are going to come at us a lot faster, and we are going to continue to have that kind of agility and flexibility to react. If you're going back to your stringent ways, you're not going to survive. So how does the technology play into that? Again, I would agree. Some of you said, hey, technology is an enabler. Fully agree with that, right? Technology on its own, it's never a good idea to do technology for the sake of technology. It really starts with the strategy of the Chief Supply Chain Officer, putting in place the right processes, the right people and talent, and then you put in the right technology, and then all of a sudden you get this extra boost. So it's really a combination of all of that and not just one single part within that organization.
Can I just say that was a great answer? Thank you.
Very welcome.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that the people who make those changes, they're going to be just better positioned later. And in that way, it will stick regardless of what happens.
Matt, what's your take?
So from my perspective, you know, this is the new norm, you know, in terms of where we are in the supply chain. What my wife tells me all the time. I mean, personally, I also believe it. That's why I'm here. You know, in terms of technology enablement, in terms of the opportunity, supply chain is huge. And it's, as I say, it's an essential service. We couldn't eat, we couldn't put clothes on our back. I couldn't drive my customer car. I couldn't wear my customer shirts. I couldn't eat my customer, you know, cereal if it wasn't for supply chain. And, you know, it's very tangible. But the key thing here is that what we're requiring is a perfect orchestration of manual repetitive tasks. That's what we need to be able to make this happen. And the opportunity to automate every touch point associated with that, whether or not it's packaging, whether or not it's, you know, putting that on a pallet, whether or not it's putting it in a truck, there's a lot of opportunity for automation, robotics, you know, cloud-based platforms, planning systems, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then overall, on top of that is we're creating massive amount of data, and how do we interpret and predict based on that data? So we've got a lot of fragmented systems that are providing point solutions for the supply chain, and the opportunity to apply different technology is huge. So that's why we're seeing a lot of startups still coming into this. So I think we're still unsophisticated in where we are today. The killer app is still a spreadsheet. I still see it, you know, in big, large, multi-billion-dollar companies. They live and breathe in spreadsheets. So there's a significant opportunity for academia to play a role in providing talent to address this. There's absolutely no doubt.
I'm going to actually encourage the audience also to chime in. One of the comments Anthony made was the supply chain won't begin to win until the data infighting culture changes. So I'm sure that resonates with all of us. And then one response that came to that was like, I largely agree. and whose data is right and which source is more honest. That has also been a challenge for the industry for years. So Robert, I know you wanted to say something.
So let me quick touch on the education interface aspect. Is that students at a place like Berkeley come out with a superb education in analytics, but they come out with almost no education in what I call domain knowledge about things like supply chains and freight transportation and the gear that's used and the way things work now. And so I think it's hard for them to identify, what are the specific opportunities for innovation that will have a great impact in industry. We really need some sort of information channels from industry to academia to really complete their education and to make them really productive. I don't think industry leaders, by and large, view academia as a resource for near-term innovation, but there are a lot of bright people in a university, particularly young people with a lot of energy, and I think they can do great things if industry can somehow import that domain knowledge. And so I think it's worth thinking about, how can industry take a role in educating our kids?
I mean, I'm sure ICLAC is also just waiting to jump in here. That's like one of the focus areas at SCET is innovation that matters. The course that ICLAC talked about that we are running with Telco that we're going to run next semester is going to challenge the students to imagine a future. Like if the pandemic hit 30 years ago, we would be making $4 a minute voice calls, watch TV, read the newspaper. There was no internet, there was no online. So what can change that in 30 years when this hits again, we are all prepared. The same thing applies to supply chain. There is no reason why we cannot run a similar course where industry brings the problems, and in that partnership, students work on projects that actually are a lot more current and relevant today.
I'd also like to quickly prognosticate on the future, but before I do that, I want to put out a caveat in the form of a Yogi Berra type quote that I use fairly often, and that is that forecasting is hard, especially about the future. But I think there's some things we can see in the near term. Is one, has been mentioned before, that I think the pandemic has accelerated the shift to e-tailing from brick and mortar retailing. And I think in turn, that's accelerating the shift to more modern supply chains with more intermodalism and more cross-docking, and it emphasizes the need to manage carton level shipments, not just vehicle level shipments. I think the pandemic also makes obvious the crucial importance of managing risk and uncertainty well, and the importance of pricing and contracting transportation services in light of risk and uncertainty. Most of our panel participants today have been at talking about things at the operational level because they're providing technology for it or they're concerned of it, and that's all well and good. But there's some big, I think, strategic learnings out of what's happening and some changes at the high level that we ought to recognize. Is before the pandemic and before the recent turmoil with tariffs and potential trade wars, the industry has been good at taking a lot of cost out of their supply chains, but that's been assuming steady shipping rates and steady demand patterns. And at the same time, the carriers cut their capacities down to levels that are just adequate to accommodate those rates. And the pandemic revealed the near complete lack of flexibility in these low-cost supply chains. Many items stocked out in stores, some are still stocked out when I go look. A lot of shippers forfeited their contract rates that had volume requirements, and now they're paying very high spot prices, and they're requesting transportation capacity that's not there. I think the carriers they're experiencing fabulous volumes, paying record high spot prices, are going to rethink how much capacity they should allocate to the relatively low contract rate business, and perhaps realize that they've allocated too much to it in the past. A contract rate is really a two-edged sword. While it mitigates risk by providing guaranteed volume around the year, it also forgoes the opportunity to make real serious money during periods of tight capacity. And on the flip side, I think shippers who found themselves in a situation where the disruption meant that they could not sell as much merchandise as they had contracted to ship will be rethinking their portfolio of transportation contracts, i.e. the amount in terms of contract volume versus shipping under spot prices. I want to return to my point that I think the big challenges in supply chains is because there's just so many participants in the supply chain, and they're linked and limited by the contracts. And the way contracts traditional are is that they sometimes give them conflicting incentives, and it's tough to get along. And there could be changes that will not make everybody operating under their own contract. There's no way to make things better off, but if the contracts were different, there'd be a way to make everybody better off. And I think the recent shocks of the pandemic and the potential trade wars will prompt a rethinking of those contracts.
So Ashish, Christian, any last thoughts? We have what, 5-6 minutes here?
Quickly on the
Ashish, go ahead.
Go?
Yeah.
Okay. Now just want to point out, I agree with everything that Professor Leachman said, right? It's around a lot of players, and how do you collaborate and exchange information, because supply chain can become a very complex problem to solve. But we also, like one of the, I think Bart said, the pandemic showed how essential, or Matt said, how the supply chain operations, good supply chain operations are successful, or are essential, essential services, especially during a pandemic. So, and there are so much opportunities with new technologies to enable that collaboration, that real-time information, that I think it's a great career opportunity for any student who's looking at supply chain. It's not the stodgy old business people used to think about. There's all these, there's IoT, mobility, cloud, robotics, electrification, autonomous vehicles, autonomous transportation. They're all going to play a role in making supply chain operations more efficient.
And Christian, you also do bring a carrier and shipper perspective. Any last thoughts?
I think one of the leadership principles of Amazon is probably the right thing to talk about here, and that's obsess over the customer. So customer experience is the one thing that I think built Amazon, and that's, customer obsession is core to Project 44's mindset. So I think any problem that anyone seeks to solve is start from the customer and work backwards. If you're not solving a problem for your customer, or your product and service isn't doing something that redefines an experience or improves the experience or makes the customer feel better about interacting with you, it's going to be a really big challenge to solve any problem. So that's one of the things I think is neat about the opportunity now is students in university now grew up with Amazon's customer experience. They grew up with companies redefining themselves based on customer experience. Netflix has a unique customer experience. So I think if they apply what they learn in universities around the country and around the world to customer experience, they can help us solve some really big transportation and supply chain problems.
Very good. Any last word, Iklak, before I wrap up?
I don't know that there's that much to say. It's been, there's frankly nothing new to say here. It was, I got a lot of great points out of this. I'm talking even though there's nothing to say, right? So, I mean, starting with the changes in the insurance, the changes in demand at the first and middle, mile, the levels needed for collaboration. I really like the point on education requiring that channel between industry. And I think there's not enough time to list even the headlines for all of it. So I'm just gonna say thank you, really great, and we will work to make it actionable.
So let me also thank all the panelists for participating, all the people, Keith, Jennifer, Raphael, people at Project 44 who helped this happen. We are here, so if there will be future panels, Bart, I want to talk to you about the manufacturing and retail, see if we can get you guys on those panels as well. So our emails, our names, any time you want to connect us, this 112.me.alexkolu. That's my video call line. You call me, you'll see me. And we will, we have recorded this session. There were a lot of good comments that came in. So we'll compile them. We'll make that all available. I know some people had to leave early. But with that, I thank everybody. And hopefully in 6 months time frame or so, we'll all come back, maybe this crowd, maybe some other people, and we'll see what has manifested and how things have changed.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.